I think it's important to understand something in writing. Death.
My name's Dan, from Grim Reaper Gutters. I won't leave until I make a sale. I won't leave until I make a sale.
Death, as much as we don't like to think about, is an important aspect of everyday life. Eventually, everything and everyone dies.
People die and Yuna dances. When will she stop dancing? When will it stop?
It's something that people can relate to and how death can affect a person or life for people in general. That's why death, when used in a story, has to be used in a careful process. Death is something that should be used as an impact, especially when it comes to a character. The more closely or more important the character, the more people are going to take notice and have issue with the death if it's done wrong. And that's because you're saying goodbye to the character, and sometimes these characters that have touched our hearts in some degree, and their death can have a very powerful effect on the viewers. Games, TV, movies, books. Hell, I even know a couple board games that do this. We live in a time where our media has become so ingrained in our identities, so to me, it's no wonder that people would want to connect with a fictional character. And that's why when people find a fictional character that they love, that they connect with, it's no wonder that people are going to be upset when said character dies. That's why I kind of find it stupid that death is used in such a flimsy way in media nowadays. More often than not, the reason why a character dies in media is to cause shock and surprise to the consumer. Either that, or it's because the actor doesn't want to play anymore.
Good call.
Baby, what happened? Come here.
A character that should be used for more than that and should hold more weight. In addition, the character shouldn't be killed off in such a dumb manner. At least that's what the consensus is. There's also how games are terrible in this regard. Like, take for example, The Last of Us 2. Whether or not you think a game is good or not, that's not up for debate in this point.
You don't get to rush this.
No, we're not talking about that scene. At least not yet. However, later in the game, you're forced as Ellie to kill a dog. And it's a scripted event too, meaning you don't have any choice in the matter.
Stupid dog!
And eventually we learn that that very same dog belongs to Abby, the other playable character, and we actually get to play fetch with said dog. Now, I'm sure that some people will find that to be quite manipulative, and I find that to be a bit of a sour taste. Not because I have to kill a dog, but because the game just had me killing dogs for about 10 or so hours as grunt enemies. And this one dog is supposed to make me feel bad for Abby and make Ellie to be a bad person? I'm sorry, but when you take it out of my hands and you force me to kill a dog, then it's not really up to me to do that. Especially when the game gives me no option but to do it.
I just hate so much when people call a story bad when it kills a main character. It just doesn't make sense to me, man. It feels like The Last Jedi all over again. There were actual real reasons to not like that movie, but when it first came out, people were just mad because Luke Skywalker dies. Because we can't kill a beloved character.
Obviously, the environment down here is all salt. The ceiling's salt, the floor is salt, the walls are salt, and to an extent, the air is salt.
I'm aware that the purpose of these stories is to tell us lies. These lies are used to manipulate our emotions, but it's handled in too much of a slapdash way, and goes against the game that has been having you do this. And I find this to be really reductive to people's issues when it comes to actual character deaths. Honestly, when it comes to more major characters dying, people should be allowed to voice their issues with a death, especially if they find the character to be much more connectable. And that also leads to issues such as the setting and the lead up towards the death, as well as the issues that surround the characters dying. One complaint I've seen is Joel was turned into a plot device, and honestly I can see the argument for that. More often than not, characters will simply be there just so they can be used as a development of another character, and even more so when it's used to come out of the death of a character. There's even a trope for this, stuffed in refrigerators. and it's characterized more or less how gruesome the death is, as well as how prominent / fleshed out the character is. If you're not familiar with the trope, it essentially refers to when a character is killed off specifically so it can be used for the development of another character, oftentimes being used as a means of enraging said character that gets the development. And I can see how that trope can easily be applied to The Last of Us 2 and Joel, since in the game we're not even given a lot to work with at the beginning of the game when it comes out, and Joel... And now that I've spoken about The Last of Us 2 in a negative light, go ahead and dislike and strawman what I actually said. I won't be surprised. Granted, this here isn't the only example of this happening in games, although I think the story in No More Heroes 2 is a better revenge plot than The Last of Us 2. It too has this same trope, this time with a character named Bishop, who we know slightly from the first game and is friends with Travis Touchdown. However, we didn't really know the character. All we really know is that Bishop is friends with Travis, works at a video store, and likes to slap his salmon while he's at work. I'm not even kidding on that.
Irashamase. I was just, doing inventory.
This trope has been used countless times in media. Don't get me wrong, I'm of the mind that a trope in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's how it's executed. I cannot deny the negative connotation, though, that this trope has, especially when it's being used to consider as a hallmark of lazy writing, using the death of a character as a cheap anger for the protagonist, and devaluing the life of the character in the process, instead of giving the villains something actually interesting to do that can involve all three characters and more emotions other than simple angered angst. No More Heroes 2, I believe, does this a lot better because it actually puts the whole thing on Travis, because he gave up his crown as the #1 assassin, and it makes it a lot more interesting to involve in the journey because you're killing people who actually take, issue with the fact that Travis was able to walk away from being an assassin. There's more weight there, if you ask me. Now, I want to step back a bit and clicker zombies and beam katanas, and talk about Persona 5 and its reincarnation, Royal. I enjoy the games. They're fun, but one of the biggest issues that I have with the games is Akechi.
Delicious pancakes.
And I already gave you a spoiler warning, so shut up. Akechi, the son of the big bad evil guy, Shido, fights you in the second to last dungeon of the main game, and having betrayed the party and setting out Joker, and even attempting to kill him earlier in the story. You obviously win, and when you do, Akechi sacrifices himself in order to save the group. So far, so good. You even got the time to see the party mourn about the Detective Prince's death. And after that...
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
I know I sound reductive and being superfluous here, but the Phantom Thieves don't bring up Akechi's death, like, ever.
What?
Now, I'm not against characters dying, but if there's going to be some sort of impact, you'd expect there to be more mention of it. That being said, in Royal, I do think that there's a nice little twist where Akechi is brought back to life, temporarily, and it's actually used as a plot point in the additional content that Royal has, where he actually rejects the reality where he's alive in. I do think that's a nice little twist to the addition there, and it adds a bit more depth to Akechi's character. I mean, he's still evil pancake boy, but still I found it interesting.
Delicious pancakes.
That being said, I'm normally against that sort of plot point, bringing back a character from death. Death is normally something that's supposed to be a final frontier for a character, and this is why I don't feel any actual tension in fights with Dragon Ball Z. Oh boy, better find them Dragon Balls to bring back Goku again! If you're going to kill a character, please don't just bring them back, especially if they're used for a means of character development. Probably one of the worst offenders is Ruby, and this requires a bit of background, because in the 3rd season of the show, there's a robotic character named Penny, and she got killed off. Now, I got a lot of problems with Ruby. But there was an attempt to have Penny's death be used as Ruby Rose, the main character's character growth, as well as be used as a main mark in the entire world's development. Although I've already talked about how the writers kinda screwed up that development in my videos about Ruby, but the attempt was to have Ruby Rose's character grow from the death from one of her close friends dying. And yet...
Sal?
They brought her back. Now, I'm sure people are probably gonna type out the rules of death don't really apply to a character like Penny because she's a robot. Since she's not actually human, and thus rules shouldn't apply to her one for one, and I'm in agreement, but considering the fact that the character's death, quote-unquote, had such an impact, you'd figure that Ruby and Penny would have a discussion about this. That the pain that Ruby had felt, that the death that rocked the events of Volume 3 and essentially caused chaos in the world that happened, would be talked about! Like, nothing comes out of that revival of this character, and that's a pretty big issue for me.
I thought you were dead.
I was!
If you're gonna have a character come back to life, it should at least be talked about to some degree, cause that's kind of a big deal. In the case of Akechi, his revival is actually used as a means of controversy in the game and makes a plot point for the last part of Persona 5 Royal. At least it's doing something with the plot point. Another good example of bringing someone back from the dead is Dragon Quest XI, and this is one I actually like because where one of your party members, Veronica, sacrificed herself in order to save the party, there's actually a way to bring her back. But you run the risk of becoming a being that's lost to time, and if you do bring her back, you will actually change the future, and you'll be the one who actually knows what the hell happened. Actual consequences for messing with the natural order!
You fools! You've messed with the natural order!
There's a couple more I want to talk about, but one of the bigger offenders would have to be the cliched death by flashback. If you're not familiar with this trope, this is a trope where you're basically given a character's backstory before they're killed off, in an attempt to make you feel more sympathetic with a character and make their death more impactful. I think one of the biggest abuses of this trope is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and before you plebs get onto me, I actually really like JoJo, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize it. Characters like Caesar in Part 2 and Bruno in Part 5 are pretty much given their backstories before they meet a tragic end in this show. It's a red flag of death, and plenty of other forms of media do this all the time. At the very least, with Bruno, when he's revived, there's a big consequence when Giorno revives him. He's essentially a walking corpse, and Giorno doesn't know how long he's going to last. And Bruno's not even aware of it, and Giorno's obviously being conflicted because Bruno is the heart of the entire group, the one that holds them all together. And there's a lot more to talk about death in media, but I wanted to point it like this, that death is a very sensitive subject, and just because you kill a character, that doesn't automatically make your story good. It's a trick that a lot of writers and creators often stumble with. Of course, all this is subjective, and who knows if I'm right or wrong about this. I'm only human, and as such, I'm open to the possibility of fallacy. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. I'm MangaKamen, and remember to examine your fandom. Have a nice day.
Get out of my face, you bitch!